only Lighthouse Keeper.
This little adventure I want to tell you about had its beginning, and its ending too, for that matter, on the Channel Islands, just off the coast of Southern California. Excepting for Catalina, they're lonely islands, most of them. No people on them to speak of. Nothing but seabirds and sea otters and sea lions and a few maverick goats gone wild. In some places, the cliffs were white with bird guano. You'd have thought it was snow. That's how untouched it all was. It was kind of a graveyard of ships, too, because the ocean currents were mighty treacherous. The rocks were something to watch out for, especially if you were a seafaring man. That's why there'd been a light station out there for as long as I can remember. And that's where I come in. I was the Lighthouse Keeper. Every night, come rain, come stars, come full moon or fog, I made it my job to see that my light was burning bright. For nigh on 40 years I'd been at it, guiding ships in the night like this. Then in the mornings, if the sun burned through, I shut her down to save power. I sort of prized the old light. She was Paris-made, 1883, with the finest set of prisms you ever did see. Her beam would carry better than 20 miles to sea. My name's Haskell, Captain Moses McGonagall Haskell. I guess I was known as the old peg-legged lighthouse keeper of just about every master mariner afloat. I remember one morning hearing a commotion going on below decks, and it turned out to be my old he-goat, Ajax. Uh-oh, I said to myself, there's mutiny aboard. Well, there's only one way to handle insurrection, and that's to meet it head on. Sure enough, the Commodore of the fleet appeared and sailed into Ajax with all guns ablaze. Stupid old Ajax, he should have known he was no match for my wife. But the dance they were doing did make sort of an amusing hornpipe. That's when I made my mistake by laughing at the wrong time.
Why, you old goat. You're two of a kind.
I'd learned long since never to try to get in the last word with Mrs. Haskell. But stubborn old Ajax, he hadn't. Ajax was my buddy and sidekick. Wherever I went, he went too. I guess I found him entertaining in ways my wife didn't. She had a set of favorite names for him, beginning with Blockhead and running through Dumbcough and ending up with Numbskull. And the truth was, he was everything she said he was. What's more, he could prove it. I think he liked to travel with me partly because if I had my errands, he had his. One of his was to lay down the law whenever we met any of the wild goats that roamed the island. used to give me a headache just watching him. But the effect on Ajax himself was something else. It sort of set him up. It was like being a kid again. Maybe that was it. Maybe he just proved to himself he wasn't getting old. Of course, why he didn't before his time was beyond me, the things he'd eat. That Ajax. A stomach of cast iron. Whenever I had a good sunny day, which meant no chores at the lighthouse, I'd often take some time off and go visiting friends. My old tractor was fine for getting around on land, but what I like to call my island hopping involved a sea voyage. And for that, I had a system all my own. Times like this, Ajax was a problem I was glad to leave behind. Kind of a routine cruise I'd make on my days off like this. I wasn't long at sea before I had lots of company. First, the seagulls would spy me and come a-squawking and swooping. They knew I had a hand out for them, and I knew they knew it, and was all sort of taken for granted. I never went anywhere without my water box, because half my friends lived under the sea. And today I was looking for one in particular. But before I could make that call, somebody else dropped in. My old friend, Petunia. Petunia the pelican. When it came to eating, I swear Petunia was the original hook, line, and sinker kid. She'd swallow anything or try to. Sometimes she'd take on so much ballast she'd list a bit to port. I'd wonder if she was going to stay afloat. Well, she never actually sank, but there were days when she rode rather low in the water. The party I was really looking for on this trip happened to be one of my favorites. A sleek little seal I'd named Rosie. Today, she'd caught herself a starfish and was making a game out of the whole affair. That was like Rosie. She was just about the most playful creature I'd ever seen. When another seal came along and stole the starfish from her, it didn't seem to bother her. That was part of the game, too. Well, I had taught Rosie a little game of her own. First, I'd bang on the boat, then I'd holler, fish. Fish! Fish! Ar, 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 ar. Here, Rosie. Little Rosie. Little Rosie. She'd pop up every time. She knew her name, and she knew what fish meant. Made for on my rounds. I called it Rosie's Beach. It had the whitest sand dunes you ever saw. And that's where Rosie and I would play our game of beach ball. Some folks say a seal has to be trained to do this. I don't think so. I think they come by it natural, just like Rosie did. We'd carry on like this by the hour, Rosie and I. She was a clever little thing, friendly as a puppy dog, and about twice as talented. But I suppose her greatest trick was the one she always saved for last. Parts of the island were nesting grounds. You had to watch where you put your foot. Of course, nobody but me ever walked there or had the chance to. And maybe that's why I kind of considered myself a privileged character. The gulls, they knew me by sight and recognized me for a friend, so my coming didn't much disturb them. I never got tired of watching them. They were sort of sailboats of the air. Cormorants nested in even closer quarters, if that was possible. And I'd look in on them occasionally to see who was browbeating who. You see, I was sort of the unofficial overseer of these parts, and everybody seemed to understand that. I remember one day part of Petunia's family moved in on a neighbor. That was before it was a family. When Mrs. Turn came home, I was kind of curious to see what would happen. For that matter, I guess Petunia was too. I could see that Petunia didn't know what to do. And I knew that Turn would never budge that egg or hatch it either. And so in the end, I sort of took over. guess maybe the biggest attraction in the islands was the sea elephant colony. Biggest in both size and numbers. You'd have thought it was Sunday at Coney Island, the way they talk to each other and complain about the weather and gossip about their neighbors. The way they'd worry about their suntan and sound off on politics. And never once go near the water. It's an odd fact that a sea elephant can get sunburned just like anybody else. And so they're smart enough to cover up when they feel that old tingle starting. Wonder if I'm getting burned on top. Feels kind of hot up there. Next door to the sea elephants, there was a big gathering of sea lions and fur seals. But suddenly I noticed them all beginning to stir, showing more life than I'd seen all day. Then I caught on. It was old Ajax kicking up his heels and stirring up a fuss, just to be ornery. The seals and sea lions couldn't stand Ajax, but they didn't seem to mind me or my little boat. I really think it kind of gave them a laugh, watching me with my clumsy oars. The way they porpoise around and bob up everywhere, I figured they were trying to show me how it should be done. One of my routine chores on days like this was to take my wife's shopping list and go marketing. You might not believe it, but we had a sort of seagoing supermarket set up in business just for us. Yes, sir, just for the two of us. The address was 6 fathoms under. and you could get just about any marine delicacy you might name, starting with fresh-caught lobster right out of the briny deep. If I'd time my trip with the tide and do my shopping when it was low and the rocks exposed, I'd find abalone sitting there for the taking. Nothing more toothsome and tasty than a well-cooked abalone steak. Fish were sort of like staple goods, available any day of the week. Sea bass, cod, halibut, yellowtail, red snapper, you name it. I guess we just about had them all. Speaking for myself, I sort of favored some of the more unusual items on the bill of fare. Such things as sea urchins. Not much to look at, maybe. But if you knew how to cook them as well as my wife did, they could be quite a succulent dish. Of course, no meal's complete without greens, and I knew just where to find some. Call it seaweed, call it kelp. I like to think of it as saltwater spinach. And when it's cooked up right, it's better than the original. Or maybe you don't care for spinach. My, the meals we would have, my wife and I. Lobster and shellfish and clams, baked and boiled and barbecued, chowder and seafood salad and fish patties, the whole works. Some things, like sea urchin, you might not like till you taste them. That's how I was at first. But when I got onto the technique and knew what to look for, I couldn't get enough of them. Sometimes I'd stuff myself as bad as Petunia, but I was a happy man for it, contented with my lot, and glad to widen things up with a ready-made toothpick. That's the way I like to see my day end, everything ship-shape, and the light working into the night. The fog could get so thick on that coast you could hardly see your hand in front of your face. There was one morning I remember when I heard a rumpus at the door. I couldn't quite make out what it was. I was up tending the light at the time, and I had to come clumping all the way down the spiral stairs. Well, the caller was Ajax. And he seemed to have something on his mind. Watchdog at times. I could tell right now that he wanted me to come see something. What he expected me to see on a day like this was beyond me. The fog was flat down on the water, and not going to rise much before noon, if at all. Whatever it was, I couldn't spot it. I figured this time he was wrong. The funny thing was, he just kept standing there, as though I'd missed something. crash had hit me. The ship had run aground. There were any number of reefs along here where a ship could have come to grief. And with the fog thick as cotton, Ajax and I had only a vague idea where to look. My first hunch, though, was a bad stretch called Jackknife. And that's where we headed. I marked the direction as best I could. It was going to be a long chance hitting a target I couldn't even see. If I could just get a line to the ship, then the men could haul across a bigger line, and then I could send out the breeches boy. But everything depended on reaching them with that first line. It was 1,000 to 1 shot. Almost too much to expect. It plagued me sitting there helpless like that. What to do? What to do? By jingles, it might work. Suddenly I had a plan. It was kind of a crazy plan, but it just might do the trick. I went at it as though my own life depended on it. First, I had to find a way to get down the cliffs to the water's edge. And for me, that wasn't going to be too easy. But there are tricks to everything. Give an old salt enough rope and a good bowline, and he can accomplish most anything. Now, for the second part of my plan, I needed help of another sort. My ace in the hole was Rosie. I don't suppose she ever figured she'd be joining a life-saving crew, but I was counting on her. Because that's just what was about to happen, if my crazy scheme was going to work at all. It was a big if. Nobody knew that better than I did. But with men's lives at stake, anything goes. And I knew if anybody had a chance at saving the crew of that ship, it was Rosie.
Have you got any fish aboard? Fish! Have you got any fish?
Fish?
Ahoy! Now beat on the side of the ship and holler fish! 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 Fish!
I didn't blame the sailors for thinking I had bilge water for brains. But they didn't know Rosie like I knew Rosie. You holler fish, fish, she'd swim halfway to China. Rosie, of course, didn't know but what it was our usual game. But the real strategy was to lure her close enough so the grappling hook could snag the line she'd brought. Contact at last. Now it was a relatively simple matter to rig up the breeches buoy. First one's always a tricky one. If he can make it, the rest can. A couple of weeks after the shipwreck, I spotted a familiar vessel in the channel. It was the Coast Guard cutter coming to pay us a visit. My wife always appreciated these calls. The boys brought her dress patterns and things like needles and thread, what my wife called the necessities. The Coast Guard came on a regular schedule like this, bringing us all our supplies. Fact is, it was their lighthouse. I was always glad to see the boys. Gave me a chance to talk to somebody and hear the news from the mainland. Of course, I had a bit of news myself. I could hardly wait to fill them in about the rescue and all, though I was sure they'd heard the bare facts. Except I sort of doubted that they knew the whole truth of the matter about the important part Rosie and Ajax had played. I was starting to tell the young lieutenant all about it, how Rosie had carried the line out. Suddenly, I could see that he wasn't easy about something. Then he handed me some official-looking papers. Well, I didn't need my telescope. Retirement, it said, in big black letters. I have to confess that sort of took the wind out of my sails. The old hulk was about to be beached at last. I had one small consolation. They weren't getting rid of me for somebody else. They were bringing in a new kind of light, one that didn't need a keeper. A fully automatic thing that didn't have to think. I wondered if it would ever rescue anybody like me and Rosie did. Well, sir, you wouldn't believe it, but what happened next was one for the book. Sink me if that fool Pelican hadn't turned the tables for sure. I swear I had no hand in it, but you'd have thought I'd organized a campaign of outright sabotage. The things that happened after that. To begin with, there were surveyors all over the island, picking out the exact right spot for the new light. All very mathematical and scientific and ship-shape. But there's not an engineer alive that ever figured a goat in his calculations. Leastwise, a goat smart as Ajax. Sort of let nature take its course. Ajax's nature, that is. These boys had never seen my wife handle him with a broom. But I didn't want to spoil the fun by lending them one. My wife and I knew our days on the island were numbered. Ajax may have held things up a bit, but he couldn't really change the facts of life. The new light tower was finally finished, and that meant our departure was near. It was kind of a sad moment to think on, and I knew my wife felt it too. I made one last round of the island, just to sort of say goodbye to my friends. I guess I was really imagining things when I read disappointment in their faces, as though they sensed something was wrong. I guess maybe they just had sad faces to start with. Came at last, a worrisome time, as every woman knows. Nothing ever seems to be in the right place, and you keep thinking you've forgotten things. And you pick up a geranium, maybe, and you're trying to remember where you last saw the silverware. But finally, we were picked up bodily, you might say, the whole kit and caboodle, and plunked down on board ship, and off we went to our new life on the mainland. And that's how the old light was shut down, the original lighthouse that had been there for so long. I guess you could say it had been retired too. The new one worked all alone in the darkness with nobody around to take care of it. A thing without a soul, kind of like a mechanical heart. We took an apartment in one of those stone beehives you find, but we couldn't stand to stay cooped up in it. My wife had her errands, the beauty parlor and all that sort of thing, and I had mine, such as they were. I'd meander along the beachfront like a ship without a sail. I tried to get interested in the checker games, but my mind was back on the island. I studied the college kids getting their suntan, the beach athletes doing their stuff, but I didn't find much that was for me. All these people in the water, I kept wishing they were sea lions. They didn't know the half of surfing. I realized I was surrounded by people, a whole swarming sea of humanity, and I'd never been lonelier in my life. Maybe if I got out from shore a bit, I could strike up an acquaintance with the seagulls. Out on the jetty, I met a little fella who reminded me of Rosie. But it wasn't, of course. Wasn't anywhere near Rosie. I kept thinking about that cute little critter and wondering who she'd ever get to play beach ball. I'd bought stale bread at the bakery for the gulls, and I tried to make friends with them. But they weren't too interested. I guess on a beach like this, they had more food than they knew what to do with. They weren't near as hungry as the ones in the wild, and so they weren't near as much fun. Unbeknownst to me, there was a computer working in my favor and doing things I'd never heard of. It seems there's these machines that can take a stack of cards with holes punched in them. I didn't even know I was a punched hole in the card, but it seems like I was. Well, anyway, all these cog wheels and tapes and switches and flashing signals can size you up from the day you were born, practically. Tell you everything from the color of your eyes to your shoe size. And like I say, all these cards going through, and one of them happened to be mine. My number was up, and I didn't even know about it. Well, maybe this automation is better than I first thought. Leastwise, it reached in and fished me out of oblivion. And it put me in the hands of the National Park Service. Was I surprised when this fella in a good-looking uniform walked up and called me by name? Well, right about then, things started to happen pretty darn fast. With my wife in her best dress and me wearing my new uniform, we rode home in an official Coast Guard helicopter. I was keeping a sharp eye out to see if the old gang was still there, because I'd just been made the ranger for a brand new national monument. Now these critters were my official responsibility, just like old times, but with the U.S. government's approval. Landmark you couldn't miss. It was sure good to see it again. We were home. It was my wife who first spotted Ajax still holding the fort, belligerent as ever. I wondered if he'd even recognize me in my new getup. We swung in past the new light, circled the old one, came easing down for a landing. Ajax kicked up his heels like he was getting ready to repel all boarders. When he finally figured out it was only us, he settled right down and acted like he'd been expecting us all the time. He even let the missus give him a smack on the snoot. I never thought I'd live to see that day. Of course, I had to show off my new uniform to Rosie. And Rosie had to show off some, too. Same old Rosie and same old tricks. Finally, I went out to the nesting grounds just to check in. and a big hullabaloo broke loose. Have you ever been welcomed home by a seagull? They're definitely not a songbird. It's a sound you won't soon forget. But I will say for it, when you're standing there in the sunset of your life and glad to be back where you belong, it's a song as sweet as any meadowlark. I should know. Yes, sir, I should know.